Hey, welcome to Amanda's Book Corner. I'm Amanda, and this is my review of The Girl with Stars in Her Eyes by Xio Axelrod. So this is a book that I was looking forward to when it was about to come out in May this year. And I was surprised, but also really excited when I found out that it was also included as an add-on on Book of the Month for May. It's actually the first in a series called The Lillys, which I didn't even realize until I had finished the book. I read the entire thing thinking it was just a standalone, so when I was about to write my review and record this video, I was thrilled to learn that it's the first in a series. The second book has already been announced. It's called The Girl with Rhythm in Her Heart, so it would follow the drummer in the Lillys band. Her name is Kayla, but I'm getting ahead of myself. So let's talk about why I love this book, because make no mistake, I really did love this book. So the main reason that I wanted to read this book is because it follows a woman who is working as a musician. She's mostly a session musician at this time, but she gets an opportunity to, at least temporarily, join a band called the Lillys, who are rising up and have just been signed to a label and are about to record their first album. I love any book that has to do with music in any way. I've been obsessed with music for most of my life. I got a master's degree in music business. I'm sort of a musician, as in I'm teaching myself to play piano. I'm not very good, so don't go looking for me playing piano because you're not going to find anything. So I'm always fascinated by books that have characters that play music or at least love music and have music involved in their lives in some way. In the case of this book, which follows Toni Bennett, and yes, characters often point out her name, asking if she's related to the famous Toni Bennett that we all know. But anyway, Toni is in her mid-20s, and she has kind of a rough background. Her mom was a musician who was chasing fame. Her mom essentially abandoned her with a dad that she didn't even know up until she was 12 years old. And she spent the rest of her childhood, from the age of 12 onwards, with a dad who was kind of equally distant in his own way. While she was living in this small Pennsylvania town with her dad, she got to know this boy who also lived in the town named Sebastian. So Toni and Seb became best friends. They bonded over their shared love of music and playing guitar. They improved their guitar skills together, and they had made plans of getting out of their small town together and making it big in the music world when they were both old enough to leave the town. Now Seb is about a year and a half older than Toni, so he turned 18 and he ended up leaving without her, unannounced, and he never looked back. She never heard from him again, and of course she has held on to a grudge over the last 8 years since that event. Where this story really begins, Toni is now in Philadelphia, and she's a regular playing at a local club. She works as a session musician, playing guitar on people's albums, although usually uncredited. And one day she is suddenly reunited with Seb. Seb has also made it in the music world, and although in a very different role than she's playing, but in a very frustrating scene where she's faced with complete sexism from a horrible guy when she's working as a session musician. That producer calls in another guy to kind of redo the parts that she already did perfectly. And the person he calls in is Sebastian. So imagine their surprise when they suddenly run into each other at the same studio 8 years after they'd seen each other. But it doesn't end there. Seb is managing a band called the Lillys, who are rising up, and they've just been signed. But the problem is their guitarist, Candy, she has a lot of personal issues. She's already famous. She's an heiress, the daughter of some very rich people, and she's been in the spotlight her whole life. And although she joined this band and is a talented guitarist, she chases fame too much. She is seen in public too much, and she parties too much, and seems to be addicted to at least one substance. So the Lillys decide that they can't have her in the band, at least not for now. So they look for someone to replace her, temporarily, with the option of becoming permanent. One of the people that they reach out to and eventually settle on is Toni. So Toni joins the Lillys, and of course she's not sure how to feel about Seb being their manager, but they agree to make it work, and they try to reconcile their relationship, rekindle what they once had in a certain way, and at least become friends again. So although this is in part a romance, and I will get to that in a moment, I just want to talk about how thoroughly musical this book is. More so than most music fiction that I've read, actually. I was struck, even in the very first chapter, the prologue, about how technical the musical descriptions are. And this is largely because Xio Axelrod is a musician in addition to being an author. Her musicianship really shows in how she writes this book. So Toni plays guitar, and early on you get a lot of really specific details. They talk about the specific guitar she plays, which is a vintage Gibson. They talk about specific chords that she plays, and not just your basic standard chords, but things like a diminished B chord, which is a little bit more advanced than your standard one. And beyond that, even just the way that the author describes music and describes playing music, describes the different timbres and feelings that the music evokes. It comes from a really genuine place, and I love how technical it is, how specific it is, and how it really immerses you in the musicianship of Toni and the rest of the Lillys. So as I mentioned before, I'm kind of a musician. I wouldn't really go far enough to call myself a musician, but I am an aspiring pianist who's slowly but surely learning to play piano. But more than that, my husband is actually a true musician. He's really good at playing guitar. He's been playing guitar since he was a teenager. And reading this and all of the details about being a guitarist really made me think of my husband and the kinds of things that he talks about. So I'll have to make him read this book pretty soon. Beyond playing music, this book also really gets into the music business side of things as well, which is something I also have some background in because, as I said, I have a master's degree in music business. Haven't really gotten the opportunity to use it much in my real career, besides a few short-term gigs, but nothing, I haven't worked in any capacity that's directly with an artist, unfortunately, although I would love to. But we really get an inside look at the inner workings of the music business and the music industry. We get a look at Toni working as a session musician. Although it is thankless, it is very important in recording albums. She also plays another fairly thankless job as being a fill-in for a band's regular member. And from Seb's side, we also get a look at the management side, what goes into managing a band, the legal considerations that the band need to take into account before signing anything. In the Lillys case, they signed a pretty unfair contract, and the label to which they're signed has a little bit too much control over them, even coming down to who's in the band or not. So this book really does dive into how the music industry works and some problems that still exist within the music industry. Another thing I want to point out is that I love that the Lillys is a rock band. I love that this book really highlights rock music. So Toni is a Black woman, and a lot of people look at her and just assume that she likes rap or R&B or something. But although rock has become a predominantly white and a predominantly male genre, I like that this book shines a light on women in rock, on people in color in rock, and the importance of seeing more diversity in rock. And not just that, but also taking people seriously. There is a lot of sexism and racism within music and within rock specifically, and the Lillys is an all-women band. You can see in some instances within the book the kind of sexism that their label's putting on them, trying to dress them up to look more feminine or poppy. And these women, they first of all, they know how to play their instruments, they know how to write songs, and they do want to be authentic to themselves and to the music. And so you kind of see the uphill battle that they're fighting to be able to express themselves as genuinely as any male group would be able to do. And then with Toni, it's an added layer of not being white, kind of facing the racism and the kind of racist assumptions people might make about her and what music she knows or listens to or likes, or plays for that matter. She's a very accomplished guitarist, and I really like that this goes into a very rock direction. I have to point out that early on, Toni plays a cover of Man in the Box by Alice in Chains. I just want to say I love Alice in Chains. They're one of my favorite bands. I especially love their earlier work with Lane Staley. And Man in the Box was their first single from the first album, Facelift. And I mean, it'd be hard for me to make a list of like my top 5 or top 10 Alice in Chains songs, but Man in the Box is definitely in the top 5. It's one of my very favorite songs by them. It's actually the song that got me into them. So I love that Man in the Box kept getting, it came up probably 2 or 3 times in this book. So I was pretty excited every single time I saw it. And I was just like, oh, she's playing one of my favorite songs of all time. So that's amazing. So beyond the music, this book is also in part a romance. It's really like a second chance lovers kind of trope. Although Toni and Seb were never in a romantic relationship when they were younger, they definitely had feelings for each other. And now that they're adults, 8 years after he left, we get to understand why Seb left. We get to see whether Toni is able to forgive what he has done to her, whether they're able to move on, whether they're able to rekindle that friendship that they once had. And eventually they do kind of go back into those old romantic feelings they had for each other. And this is a slow burn though. So based on their background, it kind of necessitates a slow burn. And I do like that we're given the time for them to really work through their past and their current feelings and learn to rebuild their trust of each other. Eventually we get to see what a romantic relationship between them might look like now that they are in their 20s, doing what they had always dreamed of doing and making a name for themselves. So beyond music and romance, which are the two main themes of this book, there are also some other themes that I want to just touch on briefly. One is about family dynamics and specifically having a troubled relationship with your parents. So Toni, her mom, Mary, was also a musician, and the first half of Toni's childhood, she was brought around from town to town with her mom, living a very nomadic lifestyle, but also one that's not particularly good for a young child. You get the sense that Mary was rather selfish and cared more about her career than she did about her own daughter. Later we see how Mary has kind of constructed an entire new life without Toni in it. And we get a real sense of the personal issues that she has around not knowing when to stop, around having perhaps an addiction to gambling. When Mary does come up in Toni's life again, they have a really heartbreaking encounter, but I think that Toni makes the right choice in what she decides to do upon her mom returning and having certain requests for her. In contrast, we also see Toni's relationship with her dad also being rather tense. Although her dad, Mo, was physically present, he was emotionally detached, and he was just never a very sturdy foundation for her. He wasn't someone that she could rely on in any capacity. So I really felt bad for Toni throughout the book. She felt very alone, and I think it forced her to grow up fast and to become self-reliant pretty early on. And echoing the addiction issues that I mentioned with Mary, who is a gambler, we also kind of see that with Candy, the original guitarist of the Lillys, who, as I mentioned, she likes to party, she likes to dabble in drugs and drinking, and she seems to have a certain addiction. We don't get too many specifics about that, but it is definitely a theme that we can see throughout the book. So The Girl with Stars in Her Eyes is a really great contemporary fiction. For me, it's largely about the music. I would categorize it as music fiction, although you could also categorize it as contemporary romance or just general contemporary fiction. It was an excellent book, and I really enjoyed it, and I was actually surprised at the end when I found out that there is a sequel and it's going to be a full series. I assume all 4 of the current Lillys band members will get their own book. The next book will focus on the drummer Kayla, so I'm pretty excited about that. It comes out next spring, so I will definitely be reading that as soon as it's out. So this is a great book. I gave it 4.5 stars, and it's definitely something I'd recommend to anyone who, especially anyone who likes music, but anyone who also likes second chance romances and seeing people work their way up as an underdog in an industry that can be tough for people like them in some way. So I hope you enjoyed this review video. Please like, comment, subscribe, ring the bell, all of that good stuff so you can see all of my latest videos. I make review videos of each book I read, so at the very least you'll have 1 or 2 new videos each week, but I'll also be adding additional videos in the coming weeks. So look out for kind of more vlog style videos, listicles, stuff like that. So I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!